The morning sun barely touched the concrete when Maya opened her eyes. The cardboard beneath her had gotten soggy from the Seattle drizzle that never seemed to stop. She pulled her thin jacket tighter around her shoulders and looked up at the gray sky through the narrow alley between two tall buildings. 8 months. That's how long she'd been calling these streets home. 8 months since her 18th birthday, when the foster care system handed her a garbage bag with her few belongings and wished her luck. "You're an adult now," they'd said, like magic words that would somehow make her ready for the world. Maya stood up slowly, her joints stiff from sleeping on the hard ground. She folded the cardboard carefully and tucked it behind a dumpster. Someone had taught her that trick early on. Always save your bedding because you never know when you'll find another piece. The smell of fresh coffee drifted from the Grand Central Cafe just around the corner. Her stomach growled, reminding her that yesterday's half-eaten sandwich from a kind stranger was her last real meal. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a wrinkled piece of cardboard with "Anything helps, God bless" written in careful letters. As she walked toward the busy street, her fingers started moving on their own. Tap, 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 tap. It was something she'd done since she was little, playing invisible piano keys on whatever surface was nearby. The foster families had found it annoying. "Stop that tapping," they'd say. But Maya couldn't help it. The music lived inside her, and it had to come out somehow. The cafe's outdoor seating area was already filling up with the morning rush. Business people in expensive suits hurried past with their phones pressed to their ears. College students typed furiously on laptops while sipping fancy drinks that cost more than Maya usually saw in a week. She found her usual spot near the corner of the building, close enough to the outdoor tables that people might notice her, but far enough away that the staff wouldn't immediately ask her to leave. Maya sat down on the cold concrete and placed the cardboard sign in front of her. The first hour was always the hardest. People walked by like she was invisible. A few dropped coins without even looking at her face. One woman actually stepped over her legs like she was just another obstacle on the sidewalk, but Maya didn't let it get to her. Instead, she listened to the music playing softly from the cafe's speakers and let her mind wander. Her fingers moved against her knees, following along with the melody. It was a simple song, something she'd heard on the radio in one of her foster homes years ago. But in her head, she was adding layers to it. A bass line here, some harmony there, maybe a little improvisation in the bridge. "Excuse me, miss, you can't sit there all day." Maya looked up to see a young man in a cafe apron standing over her. His name tag said Kevin, and he looked uncomfortable, like he'd rather be anywhere else. "I'm not bothering anyone," Maya said quietly. "I'm just sitting. I know, but customers have been complaining. They say it makes them uncomfortable." Maya glanced around at the outdoor tables. Most people weren't even looking her way, but she'd learned not to argue. It never helped. "Okay," she said, starting to stand up. "Wait." Kevin's voice was softer now. "Look, I'm sorry. It's not my rule. The manager says. Anyway, there's a park about 3 blocks down. Might be better there." Maya nodded and picked up her sign. As she walked away, she heard Kevin sigh behind her. At least he'd been nice about it. The park was quieter, but there were fewer people, which meant fewer chances for help. Maya found a bench under a big oak tree and sat down again. An elderly man was feeding pigeons nearby, and the birds cooed and fluttered around him. The sound reminded her of something. A piece of music she'd heard once years ago that tried to copy the sound of birds. What was it called? Something classical. The composer had a funny name. Vivaldi, that was it. The Four Seasons. She'd found an old CD at the library when she was living with the Johnsons, her third foster family. Mrs. Johnson had caught her listening to it and said classical music was too fancy for someone like her. But Maya had loved it anyway. She'd snuck back to listen whenever she could, until the day Mrs. Johnson found the CD hidden under her mattress and threw it away. Her fingers started moving again, this time playing the melody she remembered from Spring, the elderly man feeding the pigeons looked over and smiled. "That's a lovely song you're humming," he said. Maya realized she'd been humming along, with her finger movements without even noticing. "Sorry," she said quickly. "Don't apologize. Music is meant to be shared." He scattered the last of his breadcrumbs and walked over to her bench. "May I sit?" Maya nodded, moving her sign to make room. "I'm Charlie," he said. "Retired music teacher. 42 years of trying to get kids to appreciate the classics. I'm Maya. That was Vivaldi you were humming, wasn't it? Spring from the Four Seasons? Maya's eyes widened. You recognized it? Hard not to. It's one of my favorites, though I have to say you added some interesting variations. Where did you learn to do that? For the first time in weeks, Maya felt a spark of something other than hunger or fear. I hear things in the music, like there are empty spaces where more notes could go. Charlie leaned back on the bench, studying her face. That's a gift, you know. Not everyone can hear music that way. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the pigeons hunt for crumbs. Maya's stomach growled loudly and she pressed her hand against it, embarrassed. When's the last time you ate? Charlie asked gently. Yesterday, I think. Without another word, Charlie stood up and walked to a hot dog cart across the park. He came back with 2 hot dogs and a bottle of water. Thank you, Maya whispered, trying not to eat too fast. Tell me about the music, Charlie said. How long have you been playing? I don't play, Maya said between bites. I mean, I can't. I don't have a piano or anything. But I used to, sometimes at the community center when I was younger, before they closed it down. But you still hear it. The music, all the time. Maya looked down at her hands. Sometimes I think I'm crazy. Like, who am I to think I understand music when I don't even have a place to live? Charlie was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that would stick with Maya for years to come. Music doesn't care where you live, Maya. It lives in here. He tapped his chest, and from what I can tell, you've got plenty of room for it. As the afternoon wore on and Charlie eventually said goodbye, Maya found herself humming again. This time, though, it wasn't just copying something she'd heard. It was something new, something that came from inside her, mixing with the sounds of the city around her. She didn't know it yet, but everything was about to change. 3 days had passed since Maya met Charlie in the park. His words kept echoing in her head. Music doesn't care where you live. She'd been thinking about that a lot, especially when she walked past the Grand Central Cafe and saw the old upright piano sitting by the window. The piano wasn't much to look at. Its black paint was chipped and one of the legs looked wobbly. But every time Maya passed by, she could hear it calling to her. Sometimes customers would sit down and plink out simple songs during the afternoon open mic sessions. Most of them could barely play chopsticks, but they laughed and had fun anyway. Maya pressed her face against the glass window, watching a middle-aged woman struggle through Happy Birthday, while her friends cheered her on. The woman's timing was off and she kept hitting wrong notes, but everyone was clapping and having a good time. I could do better than that, Maya whispered to herself, then immediately felt guilty for the thought. Who was she to judge? At least that woman had friends to play for. At least she had a warm place to sit. But still, her fingers traced the melody against the cold glass, showing how she would play it. Smoother, with better rhythm. Maybe add some harmony in the left hand. Hey, you're blocking the view. Maya jumped and turned around. A group of college students had taken over 3 tables on the sidewalk. Their laptops and textbooks spread everywhere. The one who'd spoken was wearing an expensive jacket and had perfectly styled hair. His friends all looked the same. Clean, confident, like they'd never worried about where their next meal was coming from. Sorry, Maya mumbled, starting to move away. Wait a minute, the same guy said, looking her up and down. You're that homeless girl who's always hanging around here, right? Maya felt her cheeks burn, but she nodded. There was no point in lying. I'm doing a sociology project on urban poverty, he continued, pulling out his phone. Mind if I ask you a few questions? Before Maya could answer, he was already recording. So how long have you been living on the streets? What's your typical day like? Do you use drugs? I don't use drugs, Maya said quickly, backing away from the camera. Come on, don't be shy. This could help people understand what you're going through. Maya looked at the phone, pointed at her face, then at the other students watching like she was some kind of science experiment. Her hands were shaking, but not from the cold. I need to go, she started to say. Wait. The word came out louder than she'd meant it to. The students looked surprised. Maya took a deep breath and pointed toward the piano visible through the cafe window. Can I play for food? The silence lasted about 3 seconds. Then they all started laughing. Did she just ask to play piano for food? One of the girls giggled, recording with her own phone now. Oh my God, that's hilarious, another one said. Yeah, right, like some homeless girl knows how to play piano. The original guy was grinning now, still filming. "This is perfect for my project. The delusions of the urban poor. Tell me, do you also think you can perform brain surgery? Maybe fly a helicopter?" "I can play," Maya said quietly, her voice almost lost in their laughter. "Sure you can, sweetheart. I bet you're the next Mozart," the girl with the second phone said in a baby voice. "Did you go to Juilliard? Or maybe Harvard School of Music?" "It's not Harvard School of Music," Maya said. "It's just called Harvard. They don't have a separate music school." The laughter stopped for a moment. The guy with the expensive jacket looked annoyed that she'd corrected him. "Whatever. Look, this has been fun, but we're trying to study here. Why don't you go find somewhere else to beg?" Maya felt something inside her chest crack a little. She'd faced rejection before plenty of times, but something about the way they were looking at her, like she was less than human, made it hurt more than usual. "I really can play," she said one more time, so quietly she wasn't sure they could hear her. "Oh, she's serious," the girl laughed. "Guys, I think she actually believes it." Just then the cafe door opened and the manager stepped out. He was a thin man in his 40s who always looked stressed. Maya had seen him before when other staff members had asked her to move along. "What's going on out here?" he asked, looking between Maya and the students. "This homeless girl is bothering our customers," the guy with the phone said, finally stopping his recording. "She's trying to get inside to mess with your piano." The manager's face darkened as he looked at Maya. "Ma'am, I've told you before about harassing our customers. I'm going to have to ask you to leave the area." "She wasn't harassing us," one of the quieter students said suddenly. "She just asked about the piano. I don't care what she asked about. She has no business being here." The manager stepped closer to Maya. "And if I see you bothering people again, I'm calling the police." Maya's face went hot with shame. All around her, other customers had stopped their conversations to stare. Some looked annoyed, others seemed uncomfortable, and a few looked almost sorry for her, but none of them said anything. "I wasn't bothering anyone," Maya said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just wanted to play music." "Look, I'm sure you think you can play," the manager said in the tone adults use when they're pretending to be patient. "But this is a business, not a charity. That piano is for paying customers only." Maya nodded, not trusting her voice anymore. She picked up her cardboard sign from where she'd set it down and started walking away. Behind her, she could hear the college student starting to laugh again. "Did you see her face when we asked about Juilliard? I can't believe she thought we'd actually let her touch that piano. Wait until I post this video. My followers are going to love it." Maya kept walking until she couldn't hear them anymore. She found herself back in the park where she'd met Charlie, sitting on the same bench under the oak tree. The pigeons were there again, pecking at crumbs someone had left behind. She pulled her knees up to her chest and wrapped her arms around them. The worst part wasn't the laughter or even the manager threatening to call the police. The worst part was the doubt that was creeping into her mind. Maybe they were right. Maybe she was delusional. Who was she to think she could play piano when she'd only had a few lessons at the community center years ago? Who was she to think she understood music when she didn't even understand how to keep herself fed and housed? But then she remembered Charlie's words again. And she remembered the way the music felt when it moved through her fingers, even when she was just tapping on her knees. That wasn't imagination. That was real. Maya wiped her eyes and looked up at the sky. The clouds were gathering again, promising another Seattle drizzle. She'd need to find shelter soon, but first she hummed a little melody. Something new, something that mixed sadness with hope, something that sounded like rain on windows and dreams that refused to die. The pigeons looked up at her as if they were listening. At least someone was. Rosa Valdez had been sitting at her corner table inside the Grand Central Cafe when the whole thing happened. At 73, she'd seen enough of the world to recognize cruelty when it was right in front of her. But something about what she'd just witnessed made her hands shake as she set down her coffee cup. She'd been coming to this cafe every Tuesday and Thursday for the past 2 years, ever since her husband passed away. It gave her something to do, somewhere to go. The staff knew her order by heart: black coffee, no sugar, and a blueberry scone if they had fresh ones. But today she wasn't thinking about her usual routine. She was thinking about the young girl outside who'd asked such a simple question and been treated like she was asking for the moon. "Can I play for food?" Rosa had taught piano lessons for 45 years before retiring. She'd heard that question before, though never quite like this. Usually it came from her more talented students when they were teenagers, asking if they could play at restaurants or weddings to earn spending money. She'd always encouraged them. Music was meant to be shared after all. But this girl wasn't asking for spending money. She was asking for something much more basic, something everyone deserved. Rosa watched through the window as the girl walked away, her shoulders hunched against the rain that had started falling. The college students were still laughing, still recording videos on their phones like the whole thing had been entertainment. The manager went back inside, muttering something about keeping the riffraff away. Rosa wanted to say something, but what? She was just one old woman with a cooling cup of coffee. Instead, she did something she hadn't done in years. She left her coffee unfinished and walked outside. The girl was long gone, but Rosa found herself standing where she'd been standing, looking through the window at the old piano. Rosa knew that piano well. She'd actually donated it to the cafe 3 years ago, when she downsized to a smaller apartment. It wasn't valuable, just an old upright that had been in her family for decades, but it still held a tune, and she'd thought it might bring some joy to the place. Watching amateur musicians stumble through simple songs during open mic afternoons had been charming at first. But now Rosa found herself wondering what would have happened if they'd said yes to the girl. What if they'd let her try? Something about the way she'd asked, the careful politeness in her voice suggested she wasn't just making empty boasts. Rosa had heard enough students over the years to recognize the difference between confidence and delusion. That night, Rosa couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the girl's face when the students started laughing. The way her shoulders had straightened just a little when she said, "I really can play." Like she was trying to hold on to something precious that everyone else thought was worthless. The next Thursday, Rosa came to the cafe earlier than usual and chose a table with a clear view of the street. She wasn't sure what she was looking for, but she wanted to see if the girl would come back. She did. Around noon, Rosa spotted her walking slowly down the sidewalk, that same piece of cardboard in her hands. But instead of sitting near the cafe, she kept walking. The manager's threat had apparently worked. Rosa watched her disappear around the corner and something inside her chest tightened. She'd spent 45 years teaching children to love music, and here was someone being denied the chance to even try. The following Tuesday, Rosa positioned herself at the outdoor seating area despite the chilly weather. She wrapped her coat tighter and waited. Sure enough, around the same time, the girl appeared again. This time, Rosa watched more carefully. The girl found a spot across the street where she could see the cafe, but wasn't technically bothering anyone. She sat on a low wall outside an office building, her sign propped against her knees. But it wasn't the sign that caught Rosa's attention. It was what the girl was doing with her hands. Her fingers were moving against her legs in complex patterns. Not random tapping, but deliberate movements that looked like she was playing piano. Rosa squinted, trying to follow the fingerwork. The patterns were intricate, confident. Her left hand was doing something completely different from her right hand. Rosa knew enough about piano to recognize that kind of independence between hands didn't come naturally. It took practice. Lots of it. Over the next hour, Rosa noticed other things. When a car drove by playing music, the girl would turn her head to listen, and her fingers would change their patterns. When the cafe's outdoor speakers played a song with a strong beat, she'd nod slightly, keeping perfect time. Most telling of all, when a businessman walked by talking loudly on his phone about a meeting, the girl's fingers stopped moving entirely. She wasn't just mindlessly tapping. She was responding to music. Rosa made a decision. She went inside and ordered 2 cups of hot soup and some fresh bread rolls. Then she walked across the street. "Excuse me," she said softly. The girl looked up, startled. Up close, Rosa could see she was even younger than she'd thought. Maybe 18, maybe younger. Her clothes were worn but clean, and her hair was pulled back in a careful ponytail. "I'm not bothering anyone," the girl said quickly, starting to stand. "I know you're not. I brought you some soup." The girl stared at the containers in Rosa's hands like she wasn't sure they were real. "Why?" she asked. "Because you looked hungry, and because I wanted to ask you something." Rosa sat down on the wall beside her, moving slowly because her old knees complained about the cold. "I'm Rosa. I saw what happened the other day at the cafe." The girl's face flushed red. "Oh." What's your name, dear? Maya. Maya, I've been teaching piano for most of my life, and I've been watching you for the past hour. Rosa handed her one of the soup containers and a spoon. Those aren't random finger movements you're making. Maya's eyes widened. She took the soup but didn't start eating yet. You really were serious about playing, weren't you? Maya nodded, not trusting her voice. Tell me about it. Where did you learn? For a moment, Rosa thought Maya wasn't going to answer. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she started talking. There was a community center in my neighborhood when I was 12. They had this old keyboard in the rec room, and sometimes nobody was using it. The lady who ran the after-school program, Mrs. Garcia, she knew a little bit about piano. She showed me where middle C was and how to read basic notes. Maya paused to take a sip of soup, and Rosa could see her trying not to wolf it down too quickly. I went there every day after school for 2 years, until they closed it down because of budget cuts. Mrs. Garcia gave me some beginner books before they packed everything up. I still have them. But that was 6 years ago, Rosa said gently. You haven't played since then? Not a real piano. But I practice anyway. On tables, on my legs, whatever. And I listen to everything I can. The music at stores, car radios, the cafe speakers. I learn the songs and then I figure out how they'd feel under my fingers. Maya's voice was getting stronger as she talked, like she was remembering something she'd almost forgotten about herself. Sometimes I write my own songs too. In my head. They're not very good probably, but I like them. Rosa felt something she hadn't felt in years. That electric moment when a teacher recognizes real talent hiding in an unexpected place. Maya, she said carefully, would you like to play a real piano again? The girl's eyes filled with tears so quickly it took Rosa's breath away. More than anything, Maya whispered. But nobody believes I can. Well, Rosa said, standing up and brushing off her coat. I believe you. And I think it's time we proved it. Rosa had always been a woman of action, but convincing David Park, the cafe owner, to let Maya play piano was proving harder than she'd expected. She'd been sitting in his cramped office above the cafe for 20 minutes, and he kept shaking his head. Look, Mrs. Valdez, I appreciate that you donated the piano, and I respect everything you've done for the music community here. But I can't. Just let random homeless people come in and play our instrument. She's not random, Rosa insisted. David, I've been teaching piano for 45 years. I know talent when I see it. But what if she damages it? What if she causes a scene? What if customers complain? Rosa leaned forward in her chair. What if she's extraordinary? What if we're about to witness something amazing and you're the person who almost stopped it from happening? David rubbed his temples. The cafe was struggling financially, and the last thing he needed was controversy. But Rosa had been one of his most loyal customers, and she'd never asked him for anything before. One song, he said finally. Tuesday evening when it's slow. If anything goes wrong, she's out immediately. Thank you, Rosa said, standing up. You won't regret this. But as she walked back downstairs, Rosa felt a flutter of nerves in her stomach. What if she was wrong? What if Maya really was just a homeless girl with delusions? Rosa had staked her reputation on this moment, and suddenly she wasn't sure if that had been wise. She found Maya in the park, sitting on their usual bench. The girl had been coming here every day since Rosa had promised to help her. Today she looked particularly nervous, her hands shaking as she tried to eat the sandwich Rosa had brought her. It's tonight, Rosa said, sitting down beside her. Maya stopped chewing. Tonight? Tuesday evening around 7. David says the cafe is usually quiet then. It'll be perfect. Maya's face went pale. What if I mess up? What if I freeze up? What if they're right and I can't really play? Rosa took Maya's trembling hands in her own. Child, listen to me. I've watched you practice on invisible keys for weeks. I've seen how your face lights up when you hear music. I've listened to you hum melodies that would make professional composers jealous. You can do this. But what if? No what ifs, Rosa said firmly. Trust yourself. Trust the music inside you. That evening, Maya stood outside the Grand Central Cafe watching through the window. There were maybe 15 people inside, scattered across the small tables. The old piano sat in the corner, waiting. Rosa appeared beside her. Ready? Maya's throat felt dry. I don't know what to play. Play what's in your heart. That's all anyone can ask. They walked inside together. A few customers looked up curiously as Rosa led Maya toward the piano. David emerged from behind the counter looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Folks, he announced awkwardly, we have a special guest performer tonight. Maya will be playing a few songs for us. The reaction was lukewarm at best. A few polite nods, some curious glances, and one elderly man who kept reading his newspaper like nothing had been said at all. But then Maya heard familiar voices from the outdoor seating area. Through the open door she could see them, the same college students who had laughed at her a week ago. They were back for their regular study session, laptops open, textbooks scattered across their tables. One of them, the guy with the expensive jacket, looked up from his phone and saw Maya through the doorway. His eyes widened with recognition. Oh my God, she heard him say. That's the homeless girl who thought she could play piano. No way, came another voice. Are they seriously going to let her touch that thing? Maya felt her confidence crumble. Her hands started shaking, and she almost turned around and walked right back out the door. But then Rosa's voice cut through her panic. Maya! She turned, to see Rosa standing by the piano bench, patting it gently. Forget about them, Rosa said quietly. This isn't about them. This is about the music that's been waiting inside you all these years. Maya walked over to the piano on unsteady legs. The bench creaked slightly as she sat down. She lifted the lid, and the black and white keys seemed to glow under the cafe's warm lights. Her fingers found middle C, just like Mrs. Garcia had taught her all those years ago. The note rang out clear and true, and something inside Maya settled into place. She started with something simple, a melody she'd been humming for days. Something that sounded like rain on windows and hope in dark places. Her left hand found a gentle accompaniment, and suddenly the cafe fell completely quiet. The conversation outside stopped. The elderly man lowered his newspaper. The barista stopped grinding coffee beans. But Maya wasn't thinking about any of them anymore. Her fingers were telling the story she'd never been able to put into words, about cold nights and empty stomachs, about dreams that refused to die, about music that lived in your soul even when you had nowhere else to call home. The simple melody grew into something more complex. Her right hand danced up into the higher registers while her left hand painted rich, deep harmonies below. She wasn't just playing notes anymore. She was speaking a language that everyone in the room could understand, even if they didn't know they knew it. From outside, she heard one of the college students whisper, "Holy shit." Maya smiled and let her hands find a piece she'd memorized years ago from one of Mrs. Garcia's old books. Chopin's Minute Waltz, but played with a depth and feeling that would have made the composer proud. The technical passages that made most pianists sweat flowed from her fingers like water. Someone in the cafe gasped. She transitioned seamlessly into jazz, improvising variations on a standard she'd heard on a car radio the week before. Her left hand walked through a bass line that seemed impossible for someone so small, while her right hand spun out melodies that were part memory, part inspiration, and part pure magic. More people had gathered. Customers from other tables had moved closer. The college students had abandoned their laptops and were standing in the doorway, phones out, recording everything. But this time, they weren't laughing. Maya closed her eyes and let the music carry her. She played pieces she'd only heard once, adding her own touches and interpretations. She played original melodies that had lived in her head for years, finally free to exist in the real world. When she finally opened her eyes, the entire cafe was silent. 20 people stood around the piano, some with tears running down their faces. Rosa was crying openly, her hand pressed to her heart. The silence stretched for what felt like forever. Then someone started clapping, then another person, then everyone, at once applauding so loudly that Maya thought the windows might shake. "More!" someone called out. "Play another one." But Maya just sat there staring at her hands on the keys, hardly believing what had just happened. The expensive jacket college student pushed through the crowd, his phone still recording, but this time his voice was different. I, I owe you an apology, he said. We all do. I've never heard anything like that. His friend nodded, looking embarrassed. We posted a video of us laughing at you last week. I'm going to delete it right now. No, Maya said quietly. Leave it up. But maybe post this one too. She looked around at all the faces staring at her, amazed, moved, ashamed, proud, and realized something had changed forever. Not just for them, but for her. Rosa appeared at her side, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. I told you, she whispered. I told you the music was real. Maya leaned into Rosa's embrace and smiled. For the first time in months, she felt like she was exactly where she belonged. Maya woke up the next morning in the same alley where she'd been sleeping for months. But something felt different. The cardboard beneath her was still damp. The morning air was still cold, but there was a lightness in her chest that hadn't been there before. She'd done it. She'd actually played piano in front of people and they'd listened. Really listened. Rosa had insisted on walking her to a nearby shelter the night before, but Maya had politely declined. She wasn't ready for that yet. The streets were hard, but they were familiar. Change, even good change, felt scary after so long. But as she made her way to the park for her morning routine, she noticed people staring at her. Not the usual looks she got, the ones that made her feel invisible or unwanted. These were different. A woman walking her dog smiled and nodded. A jogger actually said good morning as he passed. At first, Maya thought she was imagining it. Then she got to the park and saw Charlie, the elderly man who'd been feeding pigeons that first day they met. He was sitting on their usual bench, but today he wasn't alone. 3 other people sat nearby, all looking in her direction. There she is, Charlie said, standing up with a huge grin. Maya, you need to see this. He held up a phone and Maya's heart nearly stopped. On the screen was a video of her playing piano the night before. The number at the bottom made her dizzy. 2.3 million views. I don't understand, Maya said, sitting down heavily on the bench. One of those college kids posted this last night, Charlie explained. The whole internet's talking about you. Listen to some of these comments. He scrolled through hundreds of messages. This gave me chills. I can't stop watching this. Someone needs to help this girl get into music school. I'm crying in my office right now. But it wasn't just comments. People were sharing the video with captions like, never judge a book by its cover and this is what raw talent looks like. Local news stations had picked it up. Music blogs were writing articles. Maya's head was spinning. This is crazy. It gets better, said one of the other people, a middle-aged woman Maya didn't recognize. I'm Jennifer Walsh from the Seattle Community Foundation. We've had 47 people call our office this morning wanting to donate money specifically to help you. Another person stepped forward. I'm Dr. Peterson from the University of Washington Music Department. We'd like to talk to you about our scholarship program. Maya looked around at all these strangers who suddenly wanted to help her. A week ago, most people wouldn't even make eye contact. Now they were offering her things she'd only dreamed about. I need to find Rosa, Maya said, feeling overwhelmed. She found Rosa at the cafe, sitting at her usual table. But the cafe looked different too. Every seat was full, and there was a line of people waiting outside. David Park was behind the counter, looking frazzled but happy. There she is, someone called out when Maya walked in. The entire cafe burst into applause. Maya's face turned red as she hurried over to Rosa's table. Sit down, child, Rosa said, pulling out a chair. We need to talk. David appeared at their table with a cup of hot chocolate Maya hadn't ordered. On the house, he said. Actually, everything's on the house for you anytime you want it. I owe you an apology, Maya, and a thank you. Look around, I haven't seen this place this busy in months. It was true. Every table was occupied and people kept taking pictures of the piano in the corner. Some customers were even asking if Maya might play again. The phone hasn't stopped ringing, David continued. News reporters, talent agents, record companies. Everyone wants to know about the girl who played at my cafe. After David left, Rosa leaned across the table. Maya, I have something important to ask you. Maya sipped her hot chocolate, waiting. I'm 73 years old and I live alone in a house that's too big for me. I never had children of my own, but I spent my whole life teaching other people's children. Now I'd like to help one more student if she'll let me. Maya's eyes widened. I want to offer you a place to stay, a real home with a piano of your own. I want to help you apply to music schools. Prepare for auditions. Catch up on everything you've missed. I want to be your guardian if you'll have me. Maya's vision blurred with tears. You'd do that for me? Child, I've been waiting my whole life to find a student like you. Someone who doesn't just play music but lives and breathes it. You're not just talented, Maya. You're gifted in a way that comes along maybe once in a generation. 6 months later, Maya stood backstage at Benaroya Hall, home of the Seattle Symphony. Through the curtain, she could see over 2,000 people taking their seats. Her first official concert was about to begin. She wore a simple black dress that Rosa had helped her pick out, and her hair was styled professionally for the first time in her life. But her hands were the same hands that had tapped out invisible melodies on her knees during those cold nights on the street. You ready? Rosa asked, appearing beside her in an elegant blue dress. Maya nodded, though her heart was racing. The concert was a mix of classical pieces she'd mastered in her months of intensive study with Rosa, and original compositions that told her story. The audience included everyone who had been part of her journey. David Park sat in the third row with his wife, beaming with pride. The college students were there too. They'd become some of Maya's biggest supporters, using their social media skills to help promote her music and raise money for homeless shelters. Charlie sat in the front row next to the mayor, who had declared this Maya Rodriguez Day in the city. Even some of the people from the shelter had come, dressed in their best clothes and grinning from ear to ear. But the most important person in the audience was Mrs. Garcia, Maya's first piano teacher from the community center. Rosa had tracked her down and flown her in from Arizona as a surprise. When Maya walked onto the stage and saw her there, she almost couldn't continue. Mrs. Garcia was crying, her hands clasped together, mouthing the words, "I'm so proud of you." Maya sat down at the beautiful grand piano and placed her fingers on the keys. For just a moment, she remembered that scared girl who had asked, "Can I play for food?" and been laughed at. She thought about all the nights she'd fallen asleep humming melodies to keep herself warm, all the times she'd practiced on invisible keys, trusting that someday, somehow, the music would matter. Now it did matter, not because she was famous or because people were finally listening, but because she'd never stopped believing in the music inside her, even when no one else could hear it. Maya smiled and began to play. The first notes filled the concert hall, carrying with them the story of a girl who had been invisible, but whose music had always been real. In the audience, Rosa wiped away tears and whispered to Charlie, "I told you. The music doesn't care where you live. It only cares that you're brave enough to let it out." And as Maya's music soared through the hall, touching every heart in the audience, everyone understood exactly what she meant.